We talk a lot about the way that cryptocurrencies, decentralized finance is taking power from the establishment and giving it back to the people. Same kind of thing is happening with the tokenization, NFT boom. Let's bring in Deadmau5 founder and musician, also the Mousetrap founder, aka Joel Zimmerman. Also Dean Wilson, Deadmau5's longtime manager and business partner. The two of you have come up with something ingenious for a new song that you have collaborated with and are releasing each, I guess, individual single you purchase as an NFT. So Joel, where did you get the idea to do this? And it does seem like it's taking power from the establishment and giving it back to not only the people who love music, but the people who create it.
I'm not necessarily anti-establishment or trying to make any big waves to kick over any beehives here. Kind of experimenting with DAOs, which is like the decentralized autonomous organization, thus giving more power and control to creators and fans and owners or people who invest in that token. And it's also another kind of fun play is to kind of have maybe lobby or, prod the RIAA to recognize it as exchange of goods, just the way that SoundScan used to work with compact disc streaming platforms for, number of streams and stuff like that too. So I just think this is going to be, further down the road, one of hopefully the new norms of the way that consumers invest in their artists and purchase their art.
Dean, this is Emily here. For those holding at least one of these NFTs of the single This Is Fine, what does this actually mean in practice for them? Since they're partial owners, do they receive a commensurate cut of streaming sales, or what does that actually look like?
I equate it to the old digital download, like iTunes digital download, but it's now an NFT token that they own now, done on Mintbase with the Near Foundation. Near Protocol is a digital wallet, and with a limited amount that it could potentially go up in value like other NFTs have done. That's really, it's the technology use case that we are trying to put a spotlight on right now.
Well, you released 500,000 units of This Is Fine at Art Basel in Miami. If someone bought one of the NFTs, one of the tokens assigned to the song, they don't own the song, they own the NFT, which is in and of itself a different entity. What was the reception, Joel, to the 500,000? Did you sell out?
It's very, very early adoption. What we're looking at is basically course framework of what would hopefully become a standard. So we're experimenting in the place. Probably just as much resistance as maybe when cellular phones came out and maybe the majority said, well, what do you mean? Our conversations are floating in air. Can't just anyone listen to your conversations? There's a little bit of misunderstanding with the technology, which is totally fine because you don't need to be an auto mechanic to know how to drive a car. You kind of do at this point. But as Web3 becomes more introduced into the browsers, and of course, we get way easier access into this technology, it will still exist underneath this layer of user interface that you won't even know it's there, but it's being used. Essentially.
So Joel, what do you think were the big takeaways and the big learnings then that you can apply going forward as you try to continue with this type of sales standard and NFTs and launches going forward?
The thing I'm most excited for is obviously the utility. There's a lot of you see NFT is kind of a scary word for a lot of people because there are a lot of, I would imagine their imagination goes to JPEGs for hundreds of thousands of dollars, right? That's kind of what immediately pops in mind. But of course, we're selling these at, $1.40. The exciting thing is the utility, is how do we add on a possibly even tangible experience or product or access to something to that ownership of that NFT.
Just so you know, our executive producer is a big fan of Portugal the Man. Want to say thank you to Deadmau5, aka Joel Zimmerman, electronic musician and Mousetrap founder, Dean Wilson, Deadmau5 longtime manager and business.
So the characteristic of Web 1, if people remember their original AOL account, was an ability to look in a curated walled garden at a set of content that was not interactive but was presented to you on AOL the way that Time magazine used to show you the articles they wanted you to see inside of their magazine. The innovation of Web 2 was that suddenly you could not only read content, but you could also write content. The reason for the centralization of the internet, of course, was that all of that activity was being monetized by a very small number of companies. Facebook, as the chairwoman mentions, Google, and 2 or 3 other companies, is the ability to own the actual network. And that's what crypto assets themselves represent, is an ownership stake in an underlying network. So when you hear people talk about, for example, layer 1 tokens, this is your reward for providing the ledger maintenance services, the computing power to the network that on Web 1 and 2 was done by Google. So now people in my hometown of Pueblo, Colorado can actually own the Ethereum network. That's what the project of crypto is all about, is allowing people to directly own the networks that have native assets that are supporting it, and that's the nature of decentralization.
For our language here on the Hill, those are digital assets, right, which are the keys to open up the ledger. Describe to us how those digital assets fit into this internet revolution, Web 3.
So the concept is that you have sort of application layer tokens and you have protocol layer tokens. So if I'm an owner of Bitcoin, let's say that I'm a miner of Bitcoin, somebody who actually creates Bitcoin. The Bitcoin is the reward I receive for doing the work to keep the network operational, and that allows me to own a piece of the Bitcoin blockchain. Or take Ethereum, which is easier to understand. The Ether token represents an ownership stake in the network, but on top of that network are all kinds of apps that get built on the network, much like the apps on your phone depend on the underlying network existing that lets the phone operate. And so people will make judgments about which network is likely to win, and they will invest in the tokens in that network much the same way you might invest in Google stock because you think Google is going to scale access to the original internet. The difference being here, you can vote on what happens in the future of a proof of stake network, for example. You can get rewarded through a proof of work token for maintaining a ledger on something like Bitcoin. But the real message here is that what happens on the decentralized internet is decided by the investors, versus what happens on the main internet is decided by Twitter, Facebook, Google, and a small number of other companies.
Okay, so getting this layer on digital assets right, for Congress to understand this, everything is built upon that on-ramp to this new internet. So very important for us to be sensitive to how this develops and any actions we take in terms of laws and updating laws to incorporate these new technologies.
Mr. McHenry couldn't agree more, and I think when you hear about all of the problems of different big tech companies, the importance of an owner-controlled network becomes clear.
Owner-controlled network rather than a cooperative. So if you're not a part of management, you're not making a decision in Web 2. If you are a participant in the network, you're cooperating in the making of those decisions. I ask this not to be insulting to the panel, but to have a level set here so we have an understanding of what we're talking about. This is not simply about you on this panel. It is about trillions of dollars of assets that did not exist before Satoshi wrote his white paper 13 years ago. $3 trillion in notional value at this stage around the development of a whole new range, whole new suite of technology that will be developed across the globe, whether or not the United States embraces it and wants to compete, or if it's pushed offshore. A small panel about the discussion about Web 3. And so with that, Madam Chair, thank you for having this hearing, and I hope that we can have more understanding by policymakers about these important concepts. Thank you, Mr. Brooks.